Luke chapter 5 in 5 minutes. If you want this free handout, you can get it in the link below. The events in chapter 5 and on in the Gospel of Luke are what we would consider Jesus' earthly ministry, and this all took place between 30 and 33 AD. We have several new characters in this chapter, but some are familiar. We have Jesus, of course, and Simon, one of Jesus' apostles who we've already been introduced to. We're introduced to two other apostles, James and John, who were brothers. They were Simon's fishing companions, and Jesus also called them to be part of the 12 apostles. There's also two important characters in this chapter that we don't know the names of. They both were sick. One had leprosy, the other was paralyzed, and Jesus is going to heal them both. And then we have Levi, also known as Matthew. Jesus is going to call him. He's a tax collector. And then John the Baptist's disciples, those individuals who listened to John's preaching and were obedient to it. Where did the events of chapter 5 take place? Two primary locations around the Sea of Galilee, and specifically the city of Capernaum. There's also the account of the leper being healed, and Luke doesn't tell us exactly where that occurred. Let's talk about the summary of the chapter now. The first 11 verses are devoted to Jesus calling a few men to be his followers and a miracle that he performs in that process. So while Jesus is at the Sea of Gennesaret, also known as Galilee, he uses Simon's boat to go out into the water a little ways and then to teach all of the people who have gathered on the shore. When Jesus had finished teaching, he told Simon to throw his net overboard into the deep water to catch some fish. Simon told him that he had been fishing with his companions all night. They hadn't caught anything, but at Jesus' word, he was going to do it. So he throws his net over, and soon the net's full of tons and tons of fish to the point of breaking. Well, the fishermen manage to get all the fish in the boat and then to the shore, and when they're at the shore, Jesus calls three men mentioned specifically, Simon, James, and John. Andrew may have been there too. He calls them to become fishers of men and to be his followers. In the next short section, Jesus heals a man with leprosy. This is verses 12 through 16. So there's a man, the text says full of leprosy, really, really sick. He comes up to Jesus in confidence and he asks Jesus to heal him. And Jesus obliges and he heals him. And he tells the man not to tell anybody about what's been done for him, but to go and show himself to the priests and offer the Old Testament sacrifices for his cleansing. Then verses 17 through 26, we have another healing, this time of a paralyzed man. So Jesus was in a house and he was teaching a huge crowd that had gathered from Galilee and Judea and Jerusalem. And four men approached the house carrying a paralyzed man on a bed, and their intention was to get to Jesus to have this man healed. But because of the large crowds, they weren't able to get to Jesus, and so they decided that they were going to take another route. They were going to take the man up on the roof of the house, take the roof apart, and then lower the man down through the ceiling. Jesus welcomes the man descending through the roof, and he tells him that his sins have been forgiven. There were some scribes and Pharisees there who really took an issue at the fact that Jesus suggested he had the power to forgive sins. So as evidence that he had that power, he tells them that he's going to heal the man of his physical disability as proof that he could heal him spiritually as well. And that's exactly what Jesus does. He heals the man. He's no longer paralyzed. He gets up, he picks up his bed, and he walks home. The next section, verses 27 through 32, Jesus calls Levi to be his disciple. So Jesus is up around the Capernaum area, and he meets this tax collector named Levi, or Matthew. He calls Levi to follow him, and Levi immediately gets up from his tax booth and he follows Jesus. And after this, Levi invites Jesus to his house, and there's other tax collectors there and sinful people. The Pharisees really have a problem with this, and they begin to question Jesus about why he associates with these kinds of people, and there's a little bit of back and forth between the two. And this brings us to the last section of the chapter. This is actually one of the shorter chapters in the Gospel of Luke, verses 27 through 32. John's disciples asked Jesus a question about fasting. Some of John's followers came up to Jesus with an honest question. They wanted to know why Jesus didn't teach his disciples to fast. Jesus tells them that there would come a time when his disciples would fast, but not while he, the bridegroom, was there with them. And he then proceeds to tell them the parable of the garment and the parable of the wineskin. As we think about how this chapter fits into the big picture of the Bible, it's actually very important because Jesus is just beginning to call his 12 apostles. And these 12 men are going to be integral to the church as it rolls out over the next couple of years. And we're going to see their names appear as we go throughout the rest of the New Testament. This chapter is also important in the big picture because it shows us that Jesus has power over physical ailments and spiritual ailments. And that power is the reassurance to us that Jesus is going to be able to take away all of those things for us in eternity. Let's talk about takeaways or applications now. The first one comes from the miracle of the fish, and that is that Jesus has sovereign control over all of creation. And so before we go out into God's creation to do anything, to try to accomplish anything, we should ask for God's blessing and his help to do it. And secondly, Jesus wants all men to be his followers. It doesn't matter how low you are in public opinion. Matthew was pretty low. Jesus wants and welcomes you to be his follower.